In the small, sleepy town of Millbrook, nestled between the rolling hills and thick forests, there stood a quaint little house on the outskirts. It was a house with a history, one that whispered tales of the past to those who cared to listen. But among the stories whispered in the town's corners, none were as chilling as the true horror that unfolded within its walls. The house belonged to the Travers family, a family of four who had recently moved into the area seeking a fresh start. Adam and Sarah Travers, along with their two children, Emily and Jake, believed they had found the perfect place to call home in Millbrook. Little did they know, the shadows within were waiting to engulf them in a nightmare they could never have imagined. It began innocently enough. Strange noises in the dead of night, whispers that seemed to echo through the empty corridors, and doors that would creak open on their own accord. At first, the family dismissed these occurrences as mere quirks of an old house settling into its new inhabitants. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the disturbances grew more frequent, more sinister. Emily, a curious and inquisitive girl, was the first to notice the changes. She would wake in the middle of the night to find her toys scattered across the floor, as if they had been flung aside by unseen hands. Terrified, she would crawl into her parents' bed, seeking solace in their comforting presence. Sarah, a rational woman by nature, tried to reassure her daughter that there was nothing to fear, that it was simply the wind rattling the windows or the house settling into its foundation. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over their home like a thick fog. Adam, too, noticed the changes, though he was hesitant to admit it even to himself. He would wake in the early hours of the morning to find the front door ajar, despite locking it securely before bed. He would search the house from top to bottom, heart pounding in his chest, but find no sign of intruders. It was as if the house itself was toying with them, playing a cruel game of cat and mouse. As the days passed, the family's fear turned to paranoia. They installed security cameras, bolted the doors shut, and even considered moving away from the house altogether. But no matter what precautions they took, the shadows within seemed to grow stronger, more malevolent. Then, one fateful night, as the family huddled together in the living room, the true horror of their situation was revealed. It started with a faint scratching at the front door, a sound so quiet they almost didn't hear it at first. But as the minutes ticked by, the scratching grew louder, more insistent, until it was as if something, or someone, was trying to claw their way into the house. His nerves frayed to breaking point, grabbed a baseball bat from the closet, and cautiously approached the door. With trembling hands, he threw it open, expecting to find some wild animal lurking on the other side. But what he saw froze the blood in his veins. Standing on the porch, bathed in the dim glow of the porch light, was a figure shrouded in darkness. It had the vague outline of a human, but its features were twisted and contorted, as if it had been pulled from the depths of a nightmare. Its eyes gleamed with a malevolent light, fixed on Adam with an intensity that sent shivers down his spine. For a moment, neither Adam nor the figure moved. They were locked in a silent standoff, each waiting for the other to make the first move. Then, without warning, the figure lunged forward, its movements jerky and unnatural. Adam stumbled backward, swinging the bat wildly in a futile attempt to defend himself. But before he could strike, the figure vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but an icy chill that hung in the air like a thick fog. Adam stood there, breathing heavily, heart pounding in his chest, unsure if what he had just witnessed was real or merely a trick of the mind. As dawn broke over the horizon, bathing the world in a warm golden light, the Travers family emerged from their home, shaken but alive. They packed their belongings in silence, their minds reeling from the horrors they had witnessed within those walls. And as they drove away from the house for the final time, leaving behind the shadows that had haunted them for so long, they couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the darkness they had fled was still lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next unsuspecting victim. In the heart of a small town nestled between dense forests, there stood an old house with a history shrouded in mystery. Its windows were like eyes, seemingly watching over the town with an eerie gaze. Locals whispered tales of inexplicable occurrences within its walls, of shadows that moved on their own accord, and whispers that echoed through the night. Yet, despite the warnings, the house remained standing, a testament to the darkness that lurked within. The Smith family, unaware of the ominous tales surrounding the old house, moved into the town seeking a fresh start. John and Emily Smith, along with their two children, Maya and Ethan, were drawn to the quaint charm of the town and the affordable price of the house. Little did they know, their decision to move into the old house would change their lives forever. As they unpacked their belongings, Mia, an adventurous teenager, couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled over her. The house felt colder than it should have been, and the shadows seemed to linger in the corners, watching their every move. Ethan, her younger brother, was oblivious to her unease, excitedly exploring their new home. That night, as the family settled into their respective rooms, Maya lay awake, listening to the creaks and groans of the old house. Just as she was about to drift off to sleep, she heard a faint whisper, so soft she almost dismissed it as her imagination. But then she heard it again, clearer this time. "Leave, before it's too late." Maya's heart raced as she sat up in bed, her eyes scanning the dark room for any sign of movement. Was it just her imagination, or had someone, or something, spoken to her? She glanced at the clock on her bedside table. It was nearing midnight. Shaking off her unease, Maya convinced herself that it was just a trick of the mind, a result of the stories she'd heard about the house. She lay back down, trying to push the whispers from her mind, but sleep eluded her. The next morning, Maya hesitated to mention the strange occurrence to her family, fearing they would dismiss her as being paranoid. However, as they sat down for breakfast, Emily's expression mirrored Maya's unease. Did anyone else hear anything strange last night?" Emily asked tentatively, her voice barely above a whisper. John and Ethan exchanged confused glances, but Maya's eyes widened in surprise. "You heard it too?" Emily nodded, her eyes darting around the room. It sounded like someone whispering. John frowned, concern etched on his face. "Maybe we should look into the history of this house. See if there's any truth to those rumors." That afternoon, John visited the local library, determined to uncover the truth about their new home. As he sifted through dusty records and faded newspaper clippings, he discovered a series of disturbing events that had occurred within the walls of the old house. According to the records, the house had once belonged to a wealthy family who mysteriously disappeared without a trace. Locals whispered of foul play and dark rituals performed within the house's walls, but no concrete evidence had ever been found. That night, as the family gathered for dinner, a sense of tension hung in the air. The events of the previous night weighed heavily on their minds, casting a shadow over their new home. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. Maya's heart raced as she felt a cold chill run down her spine. From the darkness, a figure emerged, its features obscured by the shadows. "Who's there?" John called out, his voice trembling with fear. The figure stepped forward, revealing itself to be an old man with wild, unkempt hair and a haunted expression. His eyes gleamed with an otherworldly light as he spoke in a voice that sent shivers down their spines. "Beware, the darkness, it calls to you," the old man whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of their hearts. Before anyone could react, the lights flickered back on, and the old man vanished into thin air, leaving the family shaken and terrified. As John delved deeper into the history of the house, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister lurked in the shadows. As days turned into weeks, the Smith family's once peaceful existence descended into chaos. Strange occurrences became a daily occurrence. Objects moved on their own, whispers echoed through the halls, and shadows danced in the corners of their vision. Desperate for answers, John delved deeper into the history of the house, determined to uncover the truth behind the darkness that plagued them. But the more he uncovered, the more he realized that some secrets were better left buried.